Good evening, 80 ladies and gentlemen. I want to say that again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brad Barfield, Ashley County now, and I am with a good friend of mine and a history buddy, Mr. Ovid Tompkins Switzer Jr., OTS Jr., Ovid. You may see him on Facebook as Frederick. That may be his grandpa, great
Yeah,
grandpa,
great grandpa.
great grandpa. Uh, and we got some stories to tell about him. And we're going to kind of start off with that. We're going to talk a little bit about Petersburg. And this man right here is responsible for getting me tromping down in the middle of the swamp in the middle of August trying to find Petersburg. And I hope I find it. I think I have found it. I think everybody else has said that before me. But I want to get him to tell us, I want him to give us a little bit of it. He just kind of breadcrumbed me along with leading me down there with maps and stuff. And next thing I know, but I'm gonna let him tell it because he's got family from down there. He's gonna tell us about it. Tell us about what you want to. Get up there close as you can.
Basically, I started years ago wondering about Petersburg when I started researching family history and saw that my great grandfather and grandfather were involved in a lot of activities that had to do with Sulphur Springs and Petersburg. And over the years, I've ridden the swamps and everything trying to find any remains and hadn't had very much luck until Brad has really helped out a lot and come up with some historical research to find out the possible locations. And it looks like we're just going to have to get down there and brush some bush and see what we can really find out and see if we can find anything, any remains left. It's been logged over so many times that it's going to be hard to really find any physical definitive evidence that this is where it was, but we're not going to give up. We're going to still be looking for it, and it's a great historical find for Ashley County, and I think it needs to be preserved and monumented some way or another for that.
Yeah, and because this is really what it boils down to. This is a place that was this was a settlement before Crossett. They from what I understand, and they came in. The people that came in there came in from the Washita River, and they came in and they settled up there, and it was a port of some sort there, and there was involved with Sulphur Springs, and there was people coming into the resort. Maybe they said people from Louisiana would come up, and I presume coming up both by land and by water. There's an active port down there, and but now the exciting thing that I found this week was something that Jonathan Portis shared with us was that railroad track that was supposed to go to Petersburg. I don't think that it went down there, but I wanted to throw that at you and see if you've ever heard of that railroad going down there.
I had never heard of that before, and I don't really think it made it all the way because over the last 40 plus years that I've actually been down in that area, I've never seen any results of a tram work down in there. I've seen the tram come down close to Macedonia. That's probably the farthest I've ever noticed a tram that has showed up in that area. I don't think it ever made it all the way. Possibility, but I doubt it.
You can see it. Yeah. Now, now there that other tram that goes down there, it kind of goes seem like from the south up to the north. I don't even know what a tram is. Is a tram a railroad?
Tram is a railroad. It is a railroad base.
A railroad base.
Yes,
So the tracks are not
yeah,
there anymore.
that's what they built the railroad on. It built up.
You know, and back to this. Petersburg had a post office for about 11 years, as I understand it. Now, we thought, and some of your people have talked about it too. I've seen emails. He said research, but I'm going to tell you, I'm just following along where these guys have been trumping. I'm going to tell you because I've seen some of these emails back and forth talking about some of the things that I thought of to think about was like the townships, and if you could figure out where that post office was at, because that stuff was pretty specific. But then again, it was before the county. So the township wasn't there. So that's challenging. It's just, I mean, it's just like you think you get there and then go,
Yeah.
oh,
Going into another dead end. Wasn't nobody around.
nobody there to record it.
Yeah.
But Etheridge delivered down there, as I understand. Y.W. Etheridge, who was contemporaneous with your father. And they were, I mean, I think your father studied under him. Tell us a little bit about that.
Basically, back in those days, you didn't have universities for any type of profession, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, and all that. They studied under someone else. They went to an established lawyer, and then they actually clerked, studied under them to learn the law. That's what they called. And then they took their bar exam after 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it took them to gain the knowledge to pass the bar exam. It was the same way for the medical exams, that the doctors just came in, took a young man in, and trained him as an apprentice. And that was the old school way of learning the trades, of every type of trade, blacksmithing, gunsmithing, whatever. That's the way they learned their trade, was practicing under another licensed, qualified person.
Now, with your dad, there's another extraordinary story with him when he was about 26 years old. So I think he was born in 1903.
Yes.
So 26. So in 1929, this was like while Cap Gates was still here, and we don't know if he talked to Cap Gates, but we figure he did. But he had the first. Tell us about it.
Yes, sir. And he also was the first person to have a private practice in Crossett, because at the time the Crossett company did not allow any private individuals to have businesses inside the city limits. And he had several times he took off and finally found a law office that he could rent in Crossett, and he set up there, changed 2 or 3 times, and then he finally, after Crossett allowed private businesses to come in and buy property, he set up his own law office over on Pine Street, was the first one. Well, the Masonic building, and then he built one over on the Pine Street.
And again, this is a man in my brain. This is a guy that was born in 1903. That's when Crossett was taking off. They had moved the sawmills over here in 1901, 1902, 1903. They were the bigger ones moving over 1903, and he passed away in 2001, which is probably the apex. I mean, he was there from the first trees being cut up until the time that it was at. And that's probably a good time to live.
Yes.
I would be willing to bet. Talk about him for a little bit.
Well, he was I consider a great man. He was a great helper for the undertrodden and poor. That was mainly, he tried to do all the different business activities that he could. He had a store in West Crossett, which turned out to be a Western Auto, a furniture store, a gas station. And at the time when the Crossett was paying off in their chit, they called it, he would take the Crossett employees' chits as payment. Then he'd go up and turn them into the Crossett company and receive his cash. So it took a little while before he could get his cash, but he accepted the Crossett company chits at the time for anybody who wanted to buy all of them. He also had a Kaiser Fraser dealership and a Henry J dealership during that time, back in the old days.
Really?
Yes.
And the motel.
And then the hotel and the motel and the Wagon Wheel Cafe.
Now that was in North Crossett.
No, sir. It was out in West Crossett. Okay. It's the right next, just west of the motel site out here in West Crossett. That metal building there now. That was the second generation of the Wagon Wheel. It had burned, and they built a new building there, and that was the Wagon Wheel before he finally closed it.
Let's dig it. That's good, but there were some other things too. I got to read about him recently. I know it's hard to talk about our daddies, but sometimes it's not hard to talk about it whenever they did some great things. But this man, he was Um, two or three things he worked on. We just got through talking about one before we went on air here, and it was about something on the Greenville on the Mississippi River. There's some stuff that happened here in Crossett that we wrote about the other day. He is highly responsible for the Chico State Park over there in Lake Village. He served on the Parks and Tourism committee and was influential in that. In Arkansas, that's big.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things there. You could talk about some of those things that like the Mississippi River thing. Talk about it if you would.
Basically, in the older days, the old Mississippi River Bridge was a toll bridge, but they had water lines and gas lines crossing the bridge, and he went in and filed a federal suit on them, and over several years, he won the suit that removed the tolls from the bridge and made the gas line and pipeline people pay for the maintenance of the bridge where you didn't have a toll. Then the only thing you had was when you drive into Mississippi, you had the inspection station. They would ask you, were you bringing any cotton bolls or vegetables into Mississippi? You had to stop and uh, declare that you wasn't bringing anything illegal into Mississippi. And then they changed that, and you could get a uh, windshield pass and stick on there where you didn't have to stop for it when you're driving back and forth for the locals that was driving every day. They didn't have to stop at the inspection station.
But he knew how to work. He knew how to get the system set up, and that's what should have been happening. Now I remember going over there. Remember a lot of that because I had a dentist that my dad carried me to over there, Doctor Simons or something like that. So I got to see a lot of that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And then right beside that was that Chico Park. Can you speak on what his part was in that?
Basically, when he started, got on the Park and Tourism Committee, and he realized that we needed a state park in South Arkansas. It was not any, I guess, south of Little Rock at that time. It was all in North Little Rock. And he started pushing for that, and it took him years and years of politicking and arm bending and everything else before they got a chance to buy that old pecan plantation where the park is now.
Mm-hmm.
And started, I think it was in 58 or 59 when they started actually construction on the state park itself.
Hmm.
Building, basically at first it was just camping areas. Then they built a swimming pool and a couple of little courts there. They had a boat ramp, rent boats, uh, food, stuff like that. And then later on, several years later, they actually built a little old cafe there, and opened it up, and it's grown since then. It is one of the nicer state parks, rustic state parks in Arkansas.
Um, Now with him, I've noticed that some of the pictures of like that you shared with me, he now I've seen a couple of fancy places with him, but he kind of liked a place like this. I feel like he would be comfortable in a place kind of like this right here. I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, sir. He was kind of like me, just kind of a laid back country boy. He uh, he was a flashy dresser during the work days.
Mm-hmm.
He always wore a suit, tie, little fedora hat, and all that. In fact, I still have one of his old fedora hats left, and his old cowboy hat. And he was instrumental in the Crossett Riding Club. Started it up. He was one of the founding members of the Crossett Riding Club. He rode for years in the Crossett Riding Club. I remember he had a horse that I loved to ride because the dad was short like me, and he had a real tall horse. But he could sit there when he saddled up the horse. He would tap the front legs, and the horse would stretch out and go down about 3 foot, where you could actually mount the horse and ride Tonto. That was the horse's name was Tonto. But you got on him, then the horse would stand up, and you go off and ride.
Well, since we talk about him, let's go to his granddad, your great granddad, because we're talking about Sulphur Springs and Petersburg, and we kind of meander, but we stand on track here. Did your did he live primarily in Sulphur Springs area most of his life? Your father?
Uh,
Or was he?
no, sir. my great grandfather lived down in the South Springs area, and then my grandfather lived out on the what I call the old home place where I live now. That's where my dad was born, in the old home place there with my grandfather, and then my two uncles were born there with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I've tried to keep the old place up and going to hold up historical accounts. The old original house was replaced in, I'm saying, my grandfather's house was replaced probably in the early 40s, maybe. And then when I bought the place, it burned 12 years ago. So I had to move up just a little bit and built a newer house there now. But it's still on the old home place.
That's good. And I remember you talking about that fire. This fire can be horrible, but he has accumulated some really good information about Crossett and the Switzer family in particular. But Crossett, if you Crossett in a lot of ways is the story of Switzers in some ways. It's true. But now, back to the Sulphur Springs down there. And I I'm curious. I guess that your the family came from South Carolina, and it was the
Orangeburg.
Orangeburg area from over there. Uh, do you? I wonder. I guess they came by land to get here. What do you know
Yes.
about that?
As far as I know, I've heard in some of the older stuff that I had, they generally used oxen. They came down in an oxen wagon and came in. Part of them settled in Arkansas, and some more went on down into Texas, Central Texas. There's a big bunch of Switzer kin folks that I've reconnected with the last 10 or 12 years down around Blanket and Austin, Texas. That we're all interconnected there.
The and from reading about what Frederick Amos Switzer was what had going on at the down there was spectacular. I mean, I've read stories about horse races and big barbecues, 300 people, and there was some healing things going on down there. It's out in the middle of the woods. These are hardworking people. These are not easy. These are not the laid up trust fund kids that are living out there. I can assure you in that wilderness. But whenever they got there, then they had to have a little bit of downtime, and it happened right out there. And in my mind, and it was early, and there was already established before Crossett, and there was the spring. So I feel like that this this was the more established area out here before, and then it just kind of Crossett came in and started changing all that. But fill in some gaps for me if you can on that, or tell us about what you know about your great grandfather getting those springs and what he did down there.
Basically, what I have is just the research that I read up on. But once he started building the facilities there, the people came from all over. They would come by train to Hamburger Crossett, then they would take a stagecoach and ride on down to the springs and stay. It was the supposedly therapeutic water from the springs, and that was the main draw was people come down there to take their uh, baths in the Sulphur Spirit springs there. It had a lot of sulfur to it. All the wells around there, even up around my house, a shallow well was sulfur. That's all you could smell. And it was, I remember growing up, I learned to like sulfur a lot. You had to hold your nose and drink water.
Yeah.
But it was that was the main draw there at the time for Sulphur Springs was because the people bathing in it, kind of like the hot water springs up at the hot springs. And it took off there for a long time, was going good. And I guess the people just it wasn't the transportation available there later on, and as other places opened up, so it was kind of shut down. You might say slowed down, then shut down.
There's another story there around 40s, early 40s there, kind of things going up and down. And Homer Bryant came in from El Dorado, and the legend is they put him there in a tent and a cot, and he was drinking that water, and he had been there a couple 2 or 3 weeks, and he started feeling better, and he went hunting, and he killed a turkey, and it started a tradition because apparently that turkey was delicious and it was healthy, and it had been drinking that water. And Homer Bryant bought that property, I think, from you guys, didn't he?
Yes, he bought it from my great grandfather.
And and then he developed a business, a different type of business with it, bottling water. Yeah, so he wasn't doing the springs or anything like that. No. He was just selling it. Just selling the water. And Mineral Springs, Ashley Mineral Springs. Ashley Mineral Springs. But I've seen papers that says it was Switzer Mineral Springs at one point in time. So. And then later on, it's done some other things. But we've been talking for a while here. I want to. Is there anything else you want to say? I know we're getting close. I want to. Anything you want to finish out with?
No, sir. We just need to keep on with the research, and if anybody can help out on any type of information, we would sure appreciate it because we're missing a lot of it.
That is exactly right. If there's any data you have that you want to share with us, we are digging in. We are not giving up. We're gonna get the word of our county, our town, our part of the country out here. We're gonna push it out as best we can, and we appreciate it. Help with any materials, and your likes. Every time you hit like on that, it puts it out. Anytime you share it with your friends, it helps get the information about Ashley County out there. Be blessed, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Ovid, for joining us. Good night.